Okay friends, one of the first things we need to do to start this job is to safely raise and support the vehicle. I like to raise it directly on the frame. Once you have the wheel off the ground, we're going to remove our center cover. That exposes our 19mm lug nuts. Remove them all, and then remove the wheel. The next thing I like to do is remove the caliper from the bracket directly. The reason for that is because I like to take a look at the pads when I'm taking everything apart. I'm going to use an 18mm to hold the slider from spinning, and then I'm going to come right from the back side of the caliper, and I'm going to remove my 13mm nuts that hold the caliper to the bracket. Okay, we've got both our bolts here. Slide the caliper off. It's always a great idea to inspect the caliper directly. Look along these boots to make sure you don't see any moisture or anything like that, and you also want to make sure that the piston itself isn't chipped or broken in any way. Let's get the pads off of here. Feels as though this rearward one's frozen in there. There we are. I usually like to turn the wheel a little bit so I can expose these 18mm headed bolts. We're going to remove both those bolts that holds the bracket to the knuckle. I'm going to leave that in just a little bit. Remove the other one. Grab that bracket and remove the other bolt. There it is, friends. Now it's time to remove the rotor. Next, we're going to use a little bit of penetrant. We're going to come right here along where the axle nut is, and then we're going to come along the wheel bearing where it connects onto the knuckle. We want to try to spray down that area with some penetrant, and if you can see the bolts coming through the wheel bearing, spray those areas as well. Let's remove that axle nut. The next thing we need to do is make sure that our axle can move around inside the wheel bearing. If for some reason the axle does not slide in and out, take a punch, take a hammer, go right in this center hole, get it to break free. If that's not working, go ahead and spray inside there with some penetrant spray. The next thing we need to do is disconnect and unsecure our ABS wire, so when we remove the wheel bearing, it'll be ready to come out. If you were to look at the frame, you're going to see this area right here. It has a couple wires coming in, a couple wires going out. This area, leading towards the front, is actually part of the ABS wire we're going to be removing. So we need to come right here and disconnect this. Let's take my little pocket screwdriver. I'll pull it like that until I can see that white piece is pressed up against here. And then you press on this area, and you should be able to take these two apart. There we are. Now what we need to do is use our little forky tool here, or a pry bar, or whatever you might have. We're going to try to get in between this piece and the frame, because there's going to be a little push clip or piton that forces in. I'll show you what it looks like. There it is. That just forces right inside this hole, and it holds it secure. The new wheel bearing is going to come with all new clips, so you don't have to worry about breaking them. That one out of there. Okay. A lot of times the clips that go up into the control arm, they kind of get stuck up in there. You can try to pry it out of there. More than likely it's going to break the little piton going up in. So if you wanted to, if you were to look right along this side, you can see an area that we can press with a small pocket screwdriver and it'll let this come down. That's the way I'm going to remove this one. This one off of here. For this one, you need to squeeze these two tabs right here. Give them a little squeeze with some pliers, and it should pry off. There we go, friends. Now what we need to do is come from the back side of this knuckle here. If you were to look along where the axle goes through the knuckle, you're going to see where the bolts are that hold the wheel bearing to the knuckle. We're going to use an 18mm to remove all three. There's one of my bolts. Do the same to all. The next thing that I like to do is use this ABS wire. We're not going to be reusing it, so this is okay. I'm going to take it, and I'm just going to tie it right around the knuckle. Just like this. The reason for that is because now what I need to do is start bonking on this with a hammer, carefully, and try to break it free from the knuckle. When it does break free, the last thing that I want is for it to come shooting off and potentially hurt me. So this kind of acts as a safety net. Let's go ahead and start hitting this with the hammer. There we are. As you can tell, my safety net worked well. We'll just go ahead and get the backing plate off of here. There it is, friends. The next thing we need to do at this point is to clean up this area. All the areas that you notice where the wheel bearing was sitting up against the knuckle need to be nice and clean. The wheel bearing needs to be able to ground thoroughly through the knuckle. Use something like a scraper, a screwdriver if you have to. You could use a little brush. Use whatever you need to, but try to get off the majority of this rust, especially any raised areas. The next thing we'd want to do is clean up the backing plate the same way. Clean up both sides, the area that's going to be up against here, and then of course the area that the bearing is going to be against. Once you've done that, go ahead and take your bolts, make sure that they're clean. These look like they could use a cleanup, so I'm going to take them to the wire wheel. After I've done that, I'm going to apply a little bit of thread locker. So I've got these cleaned up, I've got a little bit of thread locker on there. The next thing we're going to do is use a little bit of copper never sees, try to get around the areas where the bearing's going to be resting in here. It's just going to help make it come out easier next time. I also like to get the splines on the axle. Now we have our backing plate nice and cleaned up. We did both sides where the bearing's going to ride, like I said. Go ahead and take that ABS wire that comes from your wheel bearing, slide it right down and through the center there. That's great. Now we're going to line up the slot with where this is going to go through. And then we're going to put the whole unit up onto the knuckle, just like this. Now something that's important to remember is that you want to have the slot in the backing plate facing to where the caliper is. So if I was to put this in like that, it's not going to be right. You're going to want to go twisting it until it lines up right like this. Get this ABS wire out of there. Perfect. Let's go ahead and start in those bolts. Now let's just go ahead and bottom out those bolts. Torque these to 77 foot-pounds. Now it's going to be time to get our ABS wire back resecured. We want to make sure that it doesn't get damaged by hanging around and flopping and all that stuff. So just take a look at it and take a look at all the areas that we left on here for clips. Any of those corresponding areas, we'll just take them off of the new one, okay? So I've got this clip. That just comes around back here. It's going to slide in. That's the one we got with the pliers. You remember that one. We'll bring this up through here. This one, obviously, we can take this off of here. We'll recycle that. This up here, click it in. Same thing right here. We'll get this one off of there as well. Put this up in here, latch it in, make sure you give it a nice tug. All right, so now we're just going to follow this and put it back in everywhere where it goes in. That one in there. Now we'll clip these together. Make sure you lock it in, give it a nice tug, and then secure it. Double check all your anchor points. Make sure that there's no way that this ABS wire can come loose. The last thing you want is for it to get damaged. The next thing we're going to do is get our axle nut back on here. I like to use a little bit of thread locker. We'll put it on, bottom it out, and then we'll torque it to manufacturer's specifications. Now to torque this axle nut, what you're probably going to find is that as you try to turn this to tighten it, the bearing's going to keep spinning. To cure that, you can use a nice long pry bar. Come right in between the lug studs. You want to make sure it's nice and flat so you don't damage the threads. Now we're going to torque this to 103 foot-pounds. Going with the assumption you're not replacing your brakes or your rotors, you're going to want to clean up the mounting area that goes up against where the bearing is. Now we're going to go ahead and spray down this area of the hub with some copper never sees. Put our rotor on. And then grab one of your lug nuts and start it in so it holds the rotor so it doesn't move around. Next, it's going to be time to go ahead and push in the caliper pistons. What you'll notice, if you were trying to use a tool that looks like this, which is what most people have, is you would go inside like this, squeeze in this piston. As you squeeze this one in, this one would start coming out. That could be an issue. If you're using this tool, the best way to do it would be to go ahead and take one of your old brake pads and then go ahead and grip right in the center and squeeze it down. For me personally, I have this tool right here. As you crank it, it's going to push in both these pistons at the same time. You could also use this at the same time if you wanted to. Put this in. Now we're just going to slowly push in the pistons. The next step for preparing this is we want to add a tiny bit of lubricant along the pistons themselves and then along each of these 3 ears. The reason for doing this is for vibration dampening and noise reduction. Time to get the caliper bracket on. Go ahead and take your caliper bolts and use a tiny bit of thread locker. Let's get these started. Torque these to 118 foot-pounds. Now it's going to be time to get the brake pads onto the vehicle. What you're going to notice is you should have some wear indicators. They probably came in your little bag. You can go ahead and squeeze that right onto the pads, and you want them both facing just like this. When we install these, we want the brake indicators facing up. Let's see if I can slide this in here. Should slide in nice and easy. If you have to force it in or use a hammer for any reason, you probably didn't clean up the bracket enough. These look great. Make sure they can move around freely. Go ahead and take that caliper and slide it over. Put it right down on there. Now we're going to grab our caliper mounting bolts. Got our caliper bolts with a teeny bit of thread locker. Start them in, bottom them out, and then we'll torque them down. Let's torque these to 31 foot-pounds. It's always a great idea to double check everything that you removed and replaced. Just make sure everything's secure and good to go. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and get the wheel up on here. Bring the vehicle down so the tire's just barely touching the ground so it can't spin, and then torque the wheels in a crisscross manner to 103 foot-pounds. Now it's going to be time to get our center cover on here. If you were to turn it around, you might see something that looks a lot like a valve stem. Line it up with your valve stem, and then go ahead and pop it on there. All right, now I know you think you're done, but you still need to pump up the brake pedal. And then we're going to go out there and double check that brake fluid level. Right underneath the hood, you're going to see your master cylinder. It'll tell you what type of fluid to use. You can give it a little shake and just double check to make sure you can see it's up at that maximum line.